Have you ever felt suffocated inside, as if you carried an immense force but had no space to use it? Have you ever wondered why you stay so silent, even when you're right? Why you feel a lump in your throat, while everyone thinks you're calm, cold, or even weak? The truth is simple and painful. You're not weak. You just learned to stay silent in front of the wrong people. Because every time you tried to be yourself, someone cut you off, ignored you, or ridiculed you. This video is for you who learned to swallow your words, who stored pain in your chest, and who was called too sensitive just for having real feelings. But today, you'll understand that your silence isn't weakness. It's survival, and from now on, it can be power. So take a deep breath and come with me on this stoic journey of reconnecting with your silent strength. Before we continue, if this message has already touched a wound in you, leave a like and subscribe now. You're part of this new generation of people who don't need to shout to be strong. The pain of being misunderstood. There's a pain that doesn't bleed, doesn't scream, and can't be explained. It's the pain of being misunderstood. The pain of trying to be authentic and being seen as dramatic. The pain of wanting to talk and being accused of overreacting. This wound isn't physical, but it erodes you from within, slowly, like a gentle rain that over time seeps in and destroys the foundations of your emotional well-being. Being misunderstood is like being trapped in a room with windows but no voice. You see the world, you try to signal, you gesture, but nothing is understood. It's like living an entire life speaking the language of the soul, in a world that responds with silence, sarcasm, or contempt. And every time you try to be clear, you find yourself labeled, erased, nullified. You learned early that being yourself came at a high cost. Maybe you spoke from the heart once, and they mocked your vulnerability. Maybe you tried to express pain, and they called it weakness. Maybe you took a stand, and they called you difficult. You weren't heard. You were molded. And in this invisible, silent, and cruel process, you started to silence yourself, not by choice, but as a defense. Because you realized your pain didn't fit in the shallow world around you. And so, you did what many do. You built a shield of silence, of passivity, of short sentences, of disguised smiles. But what few know is that behind this silence lives a screaming soul, a mind that analyzes everything, a heart that still beats intensely. You haven't lost your essence, you just learned to hide it to survive. And that doesn't make you weak. It makes you strong, adaptable, resilient. Being misunderstood day after day teaches you to doubt even your own truth. It makes you think, am I really overreacting? Am I wrong to feel this way? And little by little, you stop trusting your inner compass. You become a stranger in your own skin. But today, you need to reclaim that compass. You need to trust your perception, your sensitivity, your deep vision again. The pain of being misunderstood cannot silence your truth forever, because within you lies a silent strength that needs to be heard, by you first and foremost. You're not alone. Thousands live this same invisible war, but those who win are the ones who turn pain into awareness and silence into wisdom. You are one of them. And if this topic made you recognize yourself, write in the comments. My voice isn't dead, it's just maturing. And don't forget to like and share this video with someone who needs to hear this. Someone who was also silenced and deserves to rediscover themselves. When silence becomes armor, you didn't notice it right away, but little by little, you started wearing silence like someone puts on armor, not the shiny kind that protects warriors on a battlefield, but an invisible armor, forged in pain, rejection, and the fear of being hurt again. The silence that was once a choice became instinct. You stayed silent once and were spared humiliation. You stayed silent again and avoided conflict. And so, day after day, you learned that silence was a safe haven, an emotional hiding place. But over time, what protected you began to trap you. The armor that kept arrows at bay also prevented you from embracing. It didn't let pain in, but it also didn't let love reach you. You stayed unscathed, but you became isolated. The world started calling you cold, indifferent, distant. But no one saw that behind your silence was a muffled scream. I'm just trying not to break again. That armor was built with bricks of disappointment. Every no you heard, every abandonment disguised as advice, every person who said, I'm here, and disappeared when you needed them. That's how you learned that staying silent hurt less than exposing yourself. But now that armor is heavy. You feel it hides you more than it protects you. It stops you from saying what needs to be said. It makes you swallow words that deserve to be set free. And you start to wonder, do I still know how to live without it? Yes, you do, because your essence never vanished. It was just covered up. Your silence isn't absence, it's resistance. But the time has come to turn that armor into a shield, to use it when necessary, and to know how to take it off when love is genuine. You can keep being selective with your words. You can keep using silence as a tool of wisdom. But let it no longer be a prison. Let it be a conscious choice, not a camouflaged wound. If this topic spoke directly to your story, write in the comments, "My armor protected me. Now it's time to breathe." Like the video, turn on notifications and stay with me. We're just beginning this journey of reconnecting with your silent strength. The fear of reacting and being punished. Not all silence is a choice. Sometimes it's conditioning, learned over time, through swallowed tears, through reactions that led to shouting, contempt, or abandonment. You learned, perhaps as a child, that reacting was dangerous, that expressing your pain was disobedience, that saying, "this hurts me," was being dramatic, ungrateful, or rebellious. And so you shaped your existence to fit what others expected of you. You adapted. You said yes when you wanted to say no. You smiled when you wanted to cry. And you stayed silent, not for lack of courage, but from an excess of survival. Your silence wasn't shyness. It was fear of being punished for feeling. In environments where sincere reactions are punished, an emotionally mutilated human being is born. An adult who measures words, walks on eggshells, mentally rehearses every sentence before speaking. Someone who prefers superficial peace to the pain of being exposed again. You know this place well. Maybe you reacted once and were pushed away. Maybe you spoke a truth and lost someone. Maybe you just showed weakness and were called useless. And since then, your mind learned, stay quiet, no one wants to know. And that's where emotional blockage is born. You no longer trust your own reaction. You doubt its legitimacy. You start silencing yourself before anyone even asks, and that hurts. It hurts more than any poorly chosen word. But the good news is, this fear isn't eternal. It can be reframed. You can start, little by little, to give voice to what you feel, even if you're trembling, because true strength isn't the absence of fear. It's the courage to express yourself despite it. Your reaction isn't a crime. Your emotion isn't a problem. You're not difficult, too intense, or complicated. You just became an expert at staying silent to survive. But now, you're learning to live, and those who live need to allow themselves to feel and to speak. If this topic touched you deeply, comment here. I won't punish myself for feeling anymore, and share this video with someone who stays silent, but carries a universe in their chest. The confusion between peace and submission. There's a fine line between peace and submission, so fine that you often cross it without noticing. You think you're being mature by avoiding arguments. You believe you're being wise by staying silent in the face of provocation. But inside, a part of you shrinks, fades, betrays itself. You started calling peace what was actually disguised fear. Fear of breaking relationships, fear of hurting someone, fear of being seen as the problem. And over time, silence became a habit that costs you dearly. Yes, silence can be a form of self-control, but when it comes with pain, anguish, and frustration, it's no longer silence, it's erasure. And that has a price, your essence. You started to believe that avoiding conflict is always the best path, but sometimes the true path to peace goes through an uncomfortable conversation, through a truth spoken at the right time, through a firm no, even if you're trembling inside. Peace without truth is just cowardice, disguised as serenity. Submission is when you erase yourself so the other person stays comfortable. When you swallow toads to preserve a rotten relationship. When you bend so much that you forget how to stand tall. You weren't born for this. You were born to have a voice, to have presence, to exist whole, not in fragments shaped by others' convenience. True peace comes when you can take a stand calmly, when your words carry firmness without needing to shout, when your enough isn't an explosion, it's a boundary, when your yes isn't automatic, it's conscious, and when your no doesn't need justification. Peace is when you respect yourself, even if the world finds it strange. Submission is when you lose yourself just to keep up appearances. How many times have you confused the two? How many times did you tell yourself, it's okay, just to avoid rejection? Today, you can start to separate these two things. You can start speaking with wisdom, taking a stand with firmness, understanding that emotional maturity isn't swallowing everything. It's knowing what should be swallowed and what needs to be said. If this topic opened your eyes, comment now. I want peace, not submission. Like, share, and tell me, when in your life did you stay silent and regret it? Stoicism. Misunderstood. Being stoic never meant not feeling, but many get this wrong. They think the stoic mind is cold, dry, robotic, as if true control were about erasing feelings, when in reality it's about carrying them with dignity. You may have identified with Stoicism because it taught you not to react impulsively, because it showed you that external chaos doesn't need to become an internal hurricane. But at some point, you might have confused this with emotional blockage, with the habit of silencing yourself to avoid getting hurt, not out of wisdom. True Stoic philosophy doesn't turn you into expressionless marble. It invites you to feel with maturity, to interpret with clarity, to respond with awareness. It's not about staying silent out of fear. It's about choosing when and how to speak, with firmness and peace. You don't need to stop feeling anger. You need to understand where it comes from and what it's trying to show you. You don't need to hide your pain. You need to transform it into purpose. The mistake isn't in feeling, it's in getting lost in the feeling. And Stoicism offers you a compass. It says your mind cannot be a slave to emotions, but it also doesn't need to pretend they don't exist. If someone convinced you that being stoic is enduring everything in silence, tell them that even Seneca cried, that Marcus Aurelius wrote his meditations amid pain, and that Epictetus, despite physical chains, never chained his soul. You're not weak for feeling. You're strong for moving forward, even while feeling. The true Stoic doesn't run from emotion. They observe it, embrace it, process it, and respond with intelligence. Don't hide behind a distorted idea of strength. You don't need to be stone. You need to be a river. The river is calm too, but it keeps moving forward. The river navigates obstacles, but never stops flowing. Being stoic is loving deeply, without losing yourself in the other. It's suffering with awareness, without feeding the drama. It's staying silent sometimes, but also speaking when your soul demands it. It's knowing that silence is gold, but truth, when well spoken, is freedom. If you now understand true Stoicism, comment, I feel, but I don't drown. Share this video with someone who thinks strength is the absence of emotion, and show them that in truth, it's the art of feeling and moving forward anyway. Toxic people feed on your silence. Not all silence is noble. When practiced in front of the right people, it reveals wisdom. But when maintained in front of the wrong people, it becomes food for manipulators. Toxic people feed on your silence. They interpret your tolerance as permission, your respect as weakness, your self-control as submission. Have you ever noticed how some people always push the same buttons in you? They test your limits with subtle smiles. They insinuate, provoke, hurt, but in a disguised, ambiguous, subtle enough way to make you doubt whether it's worth responding. And when you don't react, they think they've won. They think they have control. And that's where the danger lies. Silence starts as protection, but can become a prison. You start letting small injustices slide, then major disrespect. And without realizing it, you're trapped in a cycle where the other person does, undoes, hurts, and returns, as if nothing happened. Toxic people love those who don't take a stand. They love those who fear conflict. They dance on your insecurities because they know you'll think 1,000 times before saying what you really feel, and they use that as a weapon to stay in control. But today, you need to understand your silence cannot be fertile ground for emotional violence. It needs to be strategic, not automatic. You have the right not to respond to everything. But you also have a duty to yourself, to protect yourself from what tries to erase you in silence. Your voice needs to stay alive, even if it's not used often. You need to know that you can speak, and more than that you deserve to be respected when you do. You're not overreacting. You're not being too sensitive. You're just tired of swallowing toads and still smiling as if nothing's wrong. The true Stoic doesn't swallow everything. They choose where it's worth staying silent and where it's necessary to assert presence, because even silence, when misplaced, feeds the other's ego, and a soul that erases itself too much becomes poisoned. You need to learn to stay silent to avoid getting involved, but you also need to learn to say enough to avoid losing yourself, because those who stay silent always end up absenting themselves from themselves, and those who don't defend themselves invite the aggressor to return. If this topic opened your eyes, write in the comments, "My silence isn't food for anyone." Like the video, share it with someone who needs to wake up and continue on this journey of strength, presence, and self-worth. Your body speaks what your mouth doesn't. You can stay silent on the outside, but your body speaks. It speaks through unexplained fatigue. It speaks through pains with no medical cause. It speaks through insomnia, anxiety, a racing heart with no apparent reason. Because the soul, when silenced for too long, finds ways to scream for help. The body doesn't lie. It registers everything you try to hide. Every time you swallow a response to keep the peace. Every time you swallow anger to avoid trouble. Every time you disguise tears with a polite smile. All of it gets recorded, not in words, but in your skin, your muscles, your short breaths, your constant tension. Have you ever noticed how your body stiffens in certain situations? How your shoulders feel heavy after an emotionally draining day? How your throat tightens when you hear something you wanted to respond to, but couldn't? That's not a coincidence. It's accumulation. It's the somatization of a soul begging for space to exist. Forced silence, the kind that comes from fear and adaptation, becomes toxic buildup. Your body becomes the storage for everything you didn't have the courage or permission to say, and there comes a time when it starts to demand payment. With illnesses, with panic attacks, with a nameless sadness. How many times have you gone to the doctor looking for a physical cause, but deep down knew the origin was something else? It was the unexpressed pain, the muffled scream, the anguish guarded so carefully that it became an internal bomb. Healing begins when you understand that feeling isn't weakness, it's wisdom, it's emotional intelligence. It's recognizing that behind physical pain, there's often an untouched emotional wound, one that needs to be heard with compassion. Your body is telling you something. It's asking you to stop betraying yourself in silence, to stop pretending everything's fine when everything's collapsing inside. It wants to see you whole, not silenced, but healed, not contained, but conscious. You don't need to explode, but you need to make space for expression, even if it's crying alone, writing, praying, talking to someone who sees you, because when the soul finds a voice, the body finds rest. If this topic touched you deeply, comment here. My body deserves rest. My soul deserves a voice. Like, share with someone who lives in silence. And let's together free what's been trapped inside for too long. You learned to protect yourself. Now you need to relearn to express yourself. You learned to protect yourself in the most dignified way you could, by staying silent. You learned to measure your words to avoid confrontation, to smile on the outside, even with your chest in ruins, to say everything's fine when inside everything was screaming for help. And it worked, for a while. Your silence avoided wars, spared relationships, kept up appearances, but it also emptied you. And now you realize that staying silent for protection can become a prison without bars, where you yourself throw away the key for fear of getting hurt again. Your soul wasn't born to live imprisoned. It was born to express itself, to be a voice, presence, pulse. And the great healing begins when you understand that you no longer need to hide. That the silence, which was once necessary, is now excessive. You're no longer that defenseless child. You're no longer the young person seeking acceptance at any cost. Today, you have awareness, scars that have turned into wisdom. You can and must express yourself with firmness, without fear of judgment. But relearning to express yourself isn't easy. It takes time. Because your throat, used to silence, will tremble in the first attempts. Because your mind, programmed to avoid conflict, will try to sabotage you. But you'll keep going, even with fear, even stammering, even crying. And one day, you'll realize that speaking your truth calmly is more liberating than staying silent to please, that a no said with respect is worth more than 1,000 yeses poisoned by resentment, that you can say what you feel without losing control, that you can show yourself and still be loved. Life taught you to hide. Now you need to relearn yourself, like someone relearning to walk after trauma, with slow but firm steps, with fear but with courage. You don't need to shout. You don't need to fight. You just need to exist fully, speak with truth, set boundaries with serenity, and make it clear, I'm here and my voice matters. If this topic gave you strength to start expressing yourself, comment now. No more hiding. My truth deserves a voice. Like, share, and send this video to someone who's also relearning to show themselves to the world. Who would you be if you had never been silenced? Stop and think, honestly. Who would you be today if your light had never been dimmed? If your voice hadn't been diminished? If you hadn't been made to believe that feeling too much was a problem, that speaking too much was a nuisance, that existing fully was too much? Would you have become someone lighter, bolder, truer? Would you have allowed yourself to smile without apologizing, to cry without shame, to shine without fear of disturbing? The truth is, you weren't born withdrawn. You were silenced. Your original essence was spontaneous, curious, communicative, but it was shaped day after day by judging looks, cutting words, and silences that hurt more than shouts. You hid to survive, adapted to belong, and without realizing it, you drifted away from your true self. You became the version others tolerated, not the one you loved. But today, you can come back to that you left behind, the you who spoke with sparkling eyes, who dreamed big, who said, I want, without fear of judgment, who cried when it hurt and smiled when happy without needing to justify. You no longer need to live under the weight of others' expectations. You no longer need to wear the cloak of silence just because someone once taught you that feeling was weakness. You have the right to reclaim yourself, to rebuild your identity with your voice, your truth, your rhythm. Life doesn't end in trauma. It restarts in the decision to look at yourself with compassion, to treat yourself as someone who deserves to be heard, respected, embraced, first by yourself, because the world will only hear you when you stop silencing yourself. Imagine, who would you be if you weren't afraid of being misunderstood? If you didn't tremble when setting a boundary? If you didn't feel guilt for distancing yourself from those who hurt you? That version of you already exists. It's inside you, waiting for permission to bloom. And that permission can only come from within. If this topic made you reflect, write in the comments, I want to rediscover who I was before the silence. Like, share, and stay with me. Our next step is to turn your silence into sovereignty. Your silence isn't weakness, it's strategic power. You learned that silence can hurt, but it can also heal. That silence can hide traumas, but it can also reveal maturity. Today, you understand that true power isn't in staying silent out of fear, but in choosing to be silent. Your silence isn't a lack of response. It's the presence of mastery. You no longer need to shout to be heard. You no longer need to justify yourself to be accepted, because you've learned that the world's noise doesn't need to shake your center, that others' impulsive reactions don't define your direction, that true strength lies in the peace of someone who knows what they feel, even when they don't say it. Silence born from wounds is a prison. Silence born from awareness is sovereignty. And today, you begin to carry this silence with a new meaning, no longer as heavy armor, but as a shield of wisdom. True stoicism isn't denying chaos. It's standing firm in the middle of it. It's knowing when to speak, when to walk away, and when to simply observe. It's mastering your own mind when everything around tries to pull you into reactivity. It's saying with your eyes what your heart has learned not to waste on pointless arguments. You've been called cold, calculating, disconnected. But the truth is, you just got tired of spending your energy where it wasn't honored. You stopped explaining yourself to those who had already decided not to understand. And that, my friend, is power. Silence is now a tactical choice, a gesture of greatness, a refusal to engage in the dance of provocation, manipulation, or others' chaos. You're not absent, you're selective, you're not distant, you're strategic. And those who don't understand that can keep talking to themselves. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. Those who need convincing are already too far from your path. And those who recognize you feel you even when you don't say a single word, because true silence carries a vibration that echoes louder than 1,000 justifications. Now, silence is no longer what protects you from the world. It's what keeps you above it. It's what preserves you from emotional contamination. It's what reminds you day after day that your peace is worth more than any victory won by shouting. If this topic sealed everything you were feeling, comment here. My silence is now my power. Like, share, and let this message reach all those who were silenced, so they can rediscover their silent strength.